welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman on this Wednesday, May 15th. Was hoping to have something out yesterday, but life and work caught up with me. But wanted to take this episode to talk about both Rutgers football and men's basketball. I've just been thinking about the anticipation. You're starting to see some media coverage now in terms of both programs for next year. Some win projections over-under came out for football. Returning production numbers came out. Also, basketball was featured in a episode of the Sleepers podcast. So one thing that really sticks out to me in terms of 2024 for football and 2024-25 for basketball is with so much anticipation and expectations raised for both programs. Both, I think, are very much aligned with their identities going into those now in the off seasons leading up to those seasons. So with football, what made me start thinking about it was the news of a mini camp tryout over the weekend. It's an amazing story. I think so many times, the news cycle moves so fast, social media moves so fast. But if you look back, Ireland Brown started as a defensive player, transferred to Rutgers, switched to the offensive line, was a starter for a time, lost his starting job last season, and now is signed to the 90-man roster of the Miami Dolphins off a mini camp tryout. It's an amazing story. It's a great story, and it's one of many that has defined, in part, Greg Schiano's time as coach at Rutgers. And, in terms of obviously Max Melton getting drafted 43rd by the Arizona Cardinals in this last month's draft, highest draft pick in 14 years. You had Sean Bowman, Isaiah Eaton, who was a useful guy in the defensive line, Jaquay Jackson, Deion Jennings, who had a great career at Rutgers, Jude McAtamey, the kicker, who was up and down and, lost his job to place kicking job to Jay Patel, did do kickoffs, but not field goals and extra points. And then Isaiah Washington. None of these guys, other than Jennings, most of them were transfers. Washington and Jennings had long careers at Rutgers and, were productive, but all of them got free agent signings following, undrafted free agent signings. And then Mine Hanatu, who had a very good career at Rutgers, and Ireland Brown got the minicamp tryouts. Brown now moving on to the 90-man roster. Obviously, a long way to go to make the 53-man roster, but it is remarkable. The program has started to progress here under Schiano 2.0. How many role players are getting looks in the NFL? And it obviously huge help with recruiting. And I think at the core of it, Schiano has been very transparent in his belief that Rutgers is a developmental program. And he's now proven it as well in terms of the guys he's getting into the NFL, at least on rosters initially, with an opportunity to make the 53-man roster. We're not just talking about draft picks here. Obviously, Bo Melton, Isaiah Pacheco, originally recruited by Chris Ash, so credit to him, but played under Schiano, getting drafted a couple years ago. Pacheco now a huge star in the NFL, 2 Super Bowls won. Bo Melton hanging on with the Packers last year, making an impact. Christian Izien, one of the best stories last year, undrafted, starts for Tampa Bay. One of the best rookies out there. Christian Braswell was drafted. So it's just great to see as the program is getting better, you're starting to see the impact that Schiano's having in terms of getting guys into the league, getting guys into the NFL, which helps perception a ton. And really just in terms of this year, right, in terms of a developmental program, you have as much experience and long-tenured guys in your program than you're probably ever going to have with the new climate in college football entering the 24 season. With so many returning starters, so many 3, 4, 5-year program guys at Rutgers under Schiano, there is no doubt that the 24 season is a special opportunity for the program to really make a statement and break out Action Headquarters Network came out with their projections or their over-unders for wins. Rutgers at 6.5. There was a tweet out there about returning production across college football. Rutgers is 13th at 72%, or they're in the mid-teens. They're tied with a few other teams. Only Iowa has more returning production than Rutgers. This includes the departure of Gavin Wimsatt. Obviously, you had Ethan Kaliakmanis, who has Big Ten experience. So in terms of the returning production, in terms of the long tenured, experienced guys in your program that you've developed over time, Rutgers has a real opportunity to make major noise next season. I was looking at the schedule for next season, and I've said this many times, there's two must wins, of course, in Howard and Akron. And then there's a ton of matchup 50-50 toss-up games. You could argue at USC is kind of, I think you put in a unlikely or unwinnable. But Penn State, Michigan State, Ohio State are not on the schedule for the first time as Rutgers being a member of the Big Ten. There's a lot of games on that schedule that if they can execute, they can win. And I wouldn't call you crazy. If you want to look at the schedule, Howard and Akron home at Virginia Tech, huge swing game, tough place to play. Virginia Tech should be better this year. Turn their season around after Rutgers beat them last year. Very difficult game. But if they win that game, you have Washington at home, completely different Washington team, will be talented, new coach, new roster, a national finalist team from a year ago. Then you're at Nebraska, very hard game, no doubt, but I don't think you can say on paper, Rutgers has no chance in that game. They'll be underdogs, but they could win that game. Year 2 of Matt Rule. And then you're home for Wisconsin and UCLA. So those first 7 games, not easy, but not daunting either. Now, I could see them being 4-3 as well. So that's how close I think it is. But I just really like the vibes around this program right now. And Ireland Brown was, it's just a great story. But it just shows that for Rutgers to get a guy in a 90-man roster that didn't even start for them last year, that lost their starting job, that speaks to the development of the program, the depth of the program is improving, and it just sends a really positive message with recruiting. So the opportunity for this team, but in terms of the stability in the program right now, David Anderson and I have talked about that a lot. There is a lot of reasons for optimism, a lot of reasons for hope. But at the core of it, the developmental part of this team is very much the identity and has put them now in a position to take that next step as a program. And the year after, the development's going to you're going to have a much steeper curve in terms of development with so many younger, unproven players. And some will get in a mix this year, but you have so many returning starters this year. So you're at the apex of that development. And then it's going to cycle over a little bit. Now you can supplant some of the transfer portal as well. But this is a huge season for Rutgers football and Greg Schiano. Identity, developmental program, very much the reason they're in the position that they are to have a special season. Now to basketball. I was very worried for a while about what the identity of this team would be and how different it's going to be from previous years and just really how Steve Pikiell has built the culture in terms of chip on your shoulder, them against the world, backs against the wall, underdogs, discounted, all that stuff. And then you bring in 2 of the top 3 recruits in the country, and Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey. And, when you thought maybe Cliff Amore would return, not that there was, he made it clear before the season he wasn't. But, fans started to dream a little bit. And, if at the time when Mag was playing well, if he came back, and obviously Jeremiah Williams is looking really good, he's returning. Expectations were, and it's funny because now that they're getting national attention, I don't think there's going to be anyone harder on this team next season than Rutgers fans themselves, because you're seeing it this offseason. And expectations are wildly high. And I'm not saying expectations should not be high, but I think the thoughts were because they're getting Ace and Dylan, that all of a sudden Rutgers is going to have this endless NIL budget to just stockpile, 3 or 4 of the top 50 guys in the transfer portal. And that's just not a reality. And, the Sleepers podcast, which I mentioned, they do a good job over there. I thought it was pretty fair. And they talked about how they liked the role players they've brought in. They obviously brought up the concern not adding a center yet. And there's some reports this week about Oguna Onsenyu from Kentucky that Rutgers has reached out. Now, again, people can leap to conclusions reaching out. I mean, if you're doing your due diligence as a staff, right, you should reach out to as many potential portal players as possible that you think could help. And so if they reached out, I mean, listen, I trust the reporting. Trilly Donovan was the first one to come out with it. He's pretty much never wrong. But I think also in terms of how much he's a realistic target, again, I think they could add a big. I think adding that depth, getting a defensive guy would be helpful. And adding depth is always a good thing. I don't think it needs to be an offensive first guy. They just don't have the money for that. I think the NIL market for centers is crazy. And you just saw a forward, a great Ozabor, getting $2 million reportedly with Washington, who just loves to overspend. And so I think that's dictated some of how Rutgers has proceeded here with the roster. I think they really do believe in Lathan Somerville and Emmanuel Igbole. I know fans are some varying degrees of panic there. But my overall point is Rutgers is adding role players that are going to fit, that they think are going to fit. Steve Pikiell's going to have to make them fit. I do think Tyson Acuff is being undervalued here as a proven scorer. And I think the bench as constituted, and they're gonna run a lot. They're gonna play very hard. They're gonna play fast pace. They're gonna press. They're gonna run in transition. I think you're gonna see. There's gonna be a bench that's gonna play, and Rutgers is gonna have some proven players on that bench. I think the bench could end up being, at least offensively, better than last season's starting five. And obviously that's not saying a ton because the offense was terrible last season. But I think that the bench is going to be much better. If you're talking about if maybe Tyson Acuff does start, we'll see. But even, a guy like Jordan Durkak, player of the year at Northeast Conference, if Zach Martini, he could start, he could come off the bench. All depends. Lathan Somerville, we'll see what happens with him, bench or starting. I mean, there's a lot of influx with this team. We don't know how it's going to shake out. I just think the depth of this team is they're going to be a fascinating team to watch. There's going to be ups and downs. This team's going to lose games. You can be a good college basketball team and lose double-digit games. It's just reality. And can you catch fire in March? But as a team, getting back to my point about identity, this is not going to be a team that's, a front runner that the media is going to pick as a top 10 team nationally. I don't think they're going to get picked in the top 4 in the Big Ten. So you can never have enough talent. You can never have enough depth. Of course, I wish that they had more of that and they added a high profile center, but I don't think that's in the cards. I still think they need a shooting wing. PJ Hayes is the name I keep hearing. I think that would be a great add. Shot 40% on almost 200 attempts in the West Coast Conference for San Diego. 6'6", good size. So we'll see what happens there. And, how they fill out the roster will ultimately be how the media projects them. But I would say right now they're a fringe top 25 team in terms of how people will be looking at them entering the season. As of now, with the way the roster is currently constructed, they are not going to be a trendy pick, to make the Final Four or anything like that. And like I said, I'm not saying they shouldn't add top talent or depth, improve their depth. But from a mentality perspective, from a team unity perspective, from a program culture perspective, I think it's a good thing because you're going to have Dylan Harper on the mic telling everyone who will listen, no one believes in us. We're going to prove everyone wrong. And that message, because that's just the way he is, and I just love everything about him. And I think he is the straw that's going to stir the drink next season. He is the key to everything. And I've spoken about his maturity and his experience and just his skill set. He's going to be the leader of this team. And he has obviously Rutgers in his blood. And I think that's really key too, in terms of keeping things together and motivating the rest of the roster in a way that, isn't always there with your star players because they don't have a family connection, in-state connection to the program. And Dylan Harper has that. And I think that's going to be essential. But my point is, you have these two top recruits that chose a program that they could have gone anywhere. And they're going to embrace the backs against the wall mentality, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder, and specifically Dylan. And it's just going to fit the vibe better. And I think obviously team chemistry, how they fit on the floor, how they play together, all of that has to come together. And they're going to be together as a team for the first time on June 15th, which is crazy, a month away. So anticipation is building. But I really think the fact that the core identity of what Steve Pikiell's program has been will remain with this team. And I think that's a good thing. And I think fan expectations, like I said, I think Rutgers fans are going to be harder and expect more than probably anyone else. And, at the end of the day, how will this team evolve? It's not going to be how this team is in November. It's going to be how is this team gelling and coming together in February, early March. How have the freshmen evolved? How have the experienced transfers adapted to their roles? Again, I think Acuff, I think he could be really good for Rutgers. I think he's a better shooter than people are giving him credit for. Martini, and Durkek, I just think they're really good fits in terms of roles that Rutgers can have them play. Jeremiah Williams back is huge. Obviously, Dylan and Ace, there's a video of Dylan. He's really bulked up. I think he's going to be a better shooter than maybe people anticipated. Ace shot over 40% from three in high school. But I still think you need to add another shooting wing. And, that 1 through 10, they're going to be versatile. They're going to be unpredictable. Defense is a question mark. Rebounding is a question mark. But I just really like the vibes of this team too. And again, I'm going back to identity. But I that was my big concern, was how is Pikiell going to manage a team that, is consensus top 10? And guess what? With the realities of NIL, that's not going to be the reality for this team. And, I get the argument, well, why didn't Rutgers go for it? It's not that they didn't go for it. I mean, it's just, do you know about Rutgers? Are you an alumni? Have you followed sports? Have you followed the university? I mean, getting donations, getting donors at Rutgers has always been a struggle for decades. And the NIL piece is another part of that. So that's a bigger topic for the future in terms of what things are going to look like post this coming season. But obviously having success and drawing top recruits, and that's all going to be very influential for the following season and beyond. And they're in talks with other, top 25, 2025 top recruits. Trey McKinney, 5-star. Nigel James, a 4-star, just to name two. Jalen Harrell is a 4-star. He's announcing soon, and he's got Rutgers in his top 5 or 6. So the future is bright. But if they can keep that core identity, I really think Pikiell cooks the best, and getting guys to believe and to play together. And I really think that this team can do that. So I'm excited for both. We're getting into, summer is almost here, Memorial Day weekend. You're getting more and more national media kind of, talking about Rutgers football and Rutgers basketball, and that's just going to increase from here on out. But those are my thoughts just in terms of thinking about both programs, core identities for both, and how they're both at front and center in terms of what these teams can be next season and how it's ultimately going to define what they become. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. Please like and subscribe. Appreciate everyone's support.